What's good, fam? Welcome back to the channel. This is Constant Sports. I am your host, Constance. Now, week 13 rankings came out, and we got some movement. We're going to have even more movement next week. All right. There was a lot of teams um, that lost some games. Um, but the games that they lost didn't really reflect their affect their rankings that much. Um, and we had quite a few teams that like completely dropped dropped completely out of like the top 10, um keeping going down. So we'll start off, obviously, South Carolina, number one. They're gonna stay number one. Even if they were to lose one or two games, they'll probably still stay number one team in the country. um they're playing great basketball, and they're just getting better and better every single game. Number two team is Kansas State, which is like their highest ranking in forever. They're playing very, very good basketball. Even when they didn't have lead for a couple of games, they still found ways to win and push through it. Iowa came up two positions from number five to number three. They got a big win over Nebraska on Sunday, I believe it was. Um, Iowa's a good team. We already know that Caitlin Clark is a great player. Um, and their conference is good. But I feel like their conference is behind the curve when it comes to knowing how to guard Clark when they play her the most. Number four team is Stanford. They came up two positions. They're playing great basketball. Stanford, to me, has always been one of those top teams, and they're continuing to show it. Playing great ball. Cameron Brink she's pretty much showing why she is one of the top prospects for the WNBA draft. NC State came up to two positions to number five. As we know, NC State started off this year really, really good. Um, they had a couple bad losses on their record, but they're still a good team. They're a team that works very well together, even with some new pieces. So I would definitely continue to watch out for NC State. Colorado went down three positions. They are now sitting at number six. Um, Colorado is still a good team, right? They're still a good team. They, they played Stanford, right? Lost to Stanford. Then they played UCLA, lost to UCLA. So they played Stanford and beat Stanford. My bad. And then UCLA, right? So then they lost to UCLA, and then they lost back to back to Oregon State. To me, Oregon State is a sleeper, right? They're a good team. They move the ball. They shoot well. So they're definitely a sleeper team. And I think Colorado went in there thinking like, oh, we're playing the number 25 team, right? But Colorado has to remember at the beginning of the season, they were the number 25 team who took down the number one team, LSU. So they have to, so their mindset, they instantly got into the, oh, I'm higher ranked, they're low ranking. They just went in there, and I don't think their minds are really in it. But then obviously they bounced back and they beat Oregon. Um, so they Colorado is still a good team. Just had a couple bad breaks with those back-to-back losses, right? They seem like they're back on the right track. We'll see how their next game goes. Sitting at the number seven is UCLA. They dropped five positions. Um, cause UCLA, obviously they lost to Colorado, which they were number five. Colorado was number three. So they beat Colorado, and then they lose to Utah, and then they beat Washington, and then Washington State beats them. So they had, within a few games time frame, pretty much within 6 days, they had three games. The 19th, well, no, the 19th, the 22nd, the 26th, and the 28th. They had four games within that week time frame, which all the teams that they played against were battles, right? They played some very good teams, even though they beat Washington 62-44. Washington is still a good team. And then you go into Washington State and they're a very good team. They're just not a ranked team, right? So losing to an unranked team definitely hurt them a little bit. Um, but they have Rice and Betts. I ain't gonna count them out for nothing, right? Number 8 team is Ohio State. They moved up 4 positions. Ohio State is really starting to look more like the Ohio State from the tournament last year. They're starting to get into their grooves. They're starting to play better. They're getting more of a regular dominance by McHannon, and so when she's playing the great basketball, their team is going to be successful. So I see Ohio State either stand where they're at or continue to climb the ranks depending on what teams above them lose. Right? The number 9 team is LSU. Um, they stayed roughly where they are because of that loss to South Carolina, but they didn't drop them because they lost to the number 1 team in the country and they only lost by 6 points. I do see LSU dropping a couple positions because they did just lose to Mississippi State. I believe it was that they just played. Was it Mississippi State that they played? Um, yeah, Mississippi State, which Mississippi State is always a feisty team. Them and LSU go head to head, battle each other every single year. It was a good game. LSU just keeps making those same mistakes with the turnovers and stuff like that. So we'll see. But I definitely see LSU dropping a couple positions, possibly down to the number 10, if not the number 11 position. But that loss might get them kicked out of the top 10. At number 10, rounding out, is Indiana. They came up 4 positions. Indiana is a good team. They shoot the ball well. They're scoring. They score in the high 70s, 80s, 85-point range. They did have a game against Northwestern where they scored 100. Now, their next game is up against Maryland, which Maryland is a feisty team. They're a very well coached team, so I like to see how Indiana plays up against them. Um, but Indiana getting into the top 10 is really, really big. So there's definitely someone to look out. UConn is sitting at number 11. They dropped 3 positions. They're now 17-4. And UConn is, if you look at the rankings, UConn is the number 11 team, and then you had teams that are lower than them that have like three losses. And I want to say that they're keeping UConn up in that higher range due to the fact that their conference isn't that strong, right? They just recently ran into their strong competition in their conference and they lost, right? And their strong competition in their conference is Notre Dame, which I feel like that should have it definitely did what it was supposed to do. It made them take a big hit in the ranking wise, um, because it shows that yes, you can beat the teams in your conference because they're not to your level, right? They haven't been to their level in a long time. Notre Dame is. So when you went up against real competition in your division, you faltered. Um, so we shall see how UConn, the rest of the conference, keeps going for them and see if they stay at roughly that 11 ranking, if not going higher, if they continue to win. Texas is sitting at number 12. They dropped 2 positions. I'm really not worried about Texas because of the fact that after losing Rory Harmon, they have stayed steady, right? They've only lost 3 games the entire season, and they lost their number 1. Their they pretty much lost their leader on the floor. Like obviously she's still there in the locker room. She probably still goes to practice with them. If she can be there on the sideline, she's gonna be there. But it's different than having someone on the sideline and in practice than it is having them on the floor. And they have really found a way to continue to win ball games, continue to grind it out. So I am 100% not worried about Texas at all. I think that they will make it to the dance, and they might upset a couple people. We'll see. Number 12 team or number 13 team is Baylor. They're pretty much sitting where they were last week. They're 16-3. They they're continuing to do the same thing, finding ways to win. Their last loss was up against Kansas State, which you can't really fault them for that because we all know Baylor is a small team. They do not have any like true post players, which if you're going up against Kansas State and you don't have post players, it's not gonna go well for you, right? Even with Lee out, they still have other post players who are just as good, maybe not as good as her, but they can handle their own, obviously. So Baylor will obviously do well against the teams that have smaller post players, but going up against a team like Kansas State or going up against a team like UCLA, where their post players are big and they're dominant, they're gonna struggle with that. Okay. Um, Number 14 is Notre Dame. They came up one position, which I feel like they should have came up more because they beat UConn, but they do have 4 losses on their record, so they're starting to climb their way back up the ladder. Um, and I don't even know what can you say about their rookie Hidalgo. She's phenomenal, phenomenal, um, and she is going to continue to lead this team. Like, this is a freshman leading this team to the victories that they've had. Um, and she's only going to get better as the season continues to go. Right? They make it into March Madness. That's just way too much experience for a freshman for them not to just destroy the competition. You got to look at it last year with Flau'jae Johnson on LSU, a freshman coming in pretty much starting in these games or coming in like the 6 man off the bench, and she just got better and better, right? And this year, Flau'jae is playing amazing. Hidalgo is already playing amazing. Imagine what it's going to be like next season. Notre Dame got something on their hands, right? Sitting at number 15 is USC. They dropped 4 positions. They took some big hits, some back-to-back losses, and back-to-back losses isn't good. It isn't good in basketball because of the fact that you're trying to make it deep into March, and your rankings definitely have you, depends on what your rankings are and who you're matched up against when it comes to March, right? So if you have these bad rankings because you're losing back-to-back games, it it kind of slows down your progress on making it far into March, right? So they lost to Utah, then they lost to Utah, they beat Colorado, and then they lost to Washington State. So those are a lot of losses, especially with Washington State being unranked, right? And Utah was number 20 when they beat USC. So those are 2 bad losses on their record. So they definitely dropped in the position. They just have to figure some things out. Like we've been saying, when you only have your team is pretty much ran by one person, you're gonna find hiccups, especially if that one person is a freshman, right? Doesn't matter how good she is. As a freshman, she still needs to be supported by her team as well. And USC just hasn't figured out who their number 2 and number 3 players are who can consistently give them double digit scoring every single game. There's always someone different, but we don't need someone different every day. We need our 3 players who are always going to give us double digits, and then we need other players who can surprise us, also throw in some double digit scoring as well. If you can get your starting 5 all scoring double digits and you still lose, then that's okay. Okay, but only having 2 people, maybe 3 people scoring in the double digits, it's hard to win. Okay, you can't have your star scoring 30, 40 points and everybody else scoring 8. You're not going to win the game. Um, so that is our top 15. Um, Obviously, we know Florida State dropped out of the rankings. Um, so when you go 16 to 25, we have Louisville, Virginia Tech, Oregon State, Gonzaga. Utah is still sitting at number 20 again. They dropped 4 positions after going up. Syracuse, Creighton, West Virginia, North Carolina, and Princeton has finally made its way into the top 25, which everyone's been trying to get Princeton into the top 25, and they finally got it. So hopefully Princeton continues to show and they continue to go up in the rankings. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you for watching and supporting. Like, comment, subscribe. Peace, love, happiness.